Ashley. My apologies for being a minute late. We can go with introductions since this is an opportunity that this is new city administrator's first time being one of these meetings with this, I believe. If I'm incorrect, my apologies. But we'll start with introductions of committee members. And
Mike Lester, City Council, Ward 2.
Mark Schwartz, Ward 5.
Derek Spicer, Ward 4.
we have Jack Deacon online as well, and Randy Wolf. Right? I guess this morning, and I'm Scott Spencer.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello, Jack Deacon's here.
Good morning, Jack. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a little early out your way, so thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's only an hour now.
All right. Some staff.
Dave Grellner, Environmental Health Manager.
Clint Smith, Director of Planning and Protective Services.
Ryan Molman, City Attorney.
Sheila Perry, Director of Finance and IT.
Matt Morash, Public Works Director.
Lindsay Oslog, Administrative Assistant.
Brent Smith, Jefferson City Public Works.
John Pitch, Public Works.
Eric Seaman, Wastewater Division Director.
Trina Williams, Planner. Tia Griffin, Public Works.
Brian Crane.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here this morning. Chair would entertain a motion for the approval of the October 12th committee meeting. Okay, that's what I have as well.
Okay.
Okay, item 3, citizens' opportunity to address committee members on any public works issues. No one. Item 4, new business. Item A is yard waste RFP discussion. Mr. Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're going to be discussing a little bit of our RFP process for our yard waste site. Just to kind of recap, I think, where we've been. As of October 31st, our existing yard waste contract has also expired. We've looked at a few proposals, and council declined those 3 proposals. And so what the city had done was move forward on a temporary site to kind of get us through this fall. So just to kind of get over what that is, we had a 708 Ellis Street that we are receiving citizen-only yard waste materials from 8 a.m. to noon on weekends between this past weekend was our first weekend, and that'll continue on through the first weekend of January. At that point, that site would close, we'd process the material, and hopefully at that time we'll be in the process of looking at a long-term alternative. So we look at that as kind of a short-term fix for the time being. So it did operate this past weekend. They say there weren't any big issues with that site. That's what we were really shooting for there, is just kind of get us through this time, and it may not be perfect, but it operated adequately for what we needed at this point. So this process here would be, at this committee meeting, is kind of discuss some of the aspects of our RFP that we used this spring. I think some of the feedback we received was that there was some desire to maybe change the scope of that RFP going forward. We had identified, I think, at least 4 components of that we'd like to kind of get some feedback and input from the committee today. Really intend this to be a little bit more of a listening as to what direction do you feel this needs to go. But I'll kind of go through the 4 that I think, based on some of the feedback, this process that we've gone through so far, is ones that might be on the table as far as looking at some revisions. So the first one of those, of course, is cost. The way the RFP right now is structured is there not a firm cost for the city. Our 3 proposals that we received this year ranged for year 1 between about $195,000, $220,000, and $275,000. So it's quite a range of costs for the city. And so I think there's been some feedback that it would be beneficial to have a kind of set amount that the city would contribute. I'm not going to necessarily offer up a specific amount, and that's why we'd like to get some feedback where that kind of range might be that we can look for. And that would be, again, changing to maybe some of the scope there. So for that price, it would maybe be just citizens again. Or it could be, we could open it up and leave it the way it is for county residents as well and commercial use. users. But right now, our current temporary site is just going to be citizen-based. So we're getting a little bit, I think, of data, if you will, from the operation of that site. And I know this past weekend we received, I think, 230, visitors or separate visits. Some of those were repeat. And we'll kind of keep track of those numbers going forward, I think, through the month of November to give us a good idea of how many residents are using that site. So if we're going to change from a model of completely city-funded to a set nominal fee that the city would contribute, and perhaps look at what a contractor would propose as far as charging individual users to make up that difference. So that would be kind of a pay-as-you-go kind of model where the city is doing a small supplement. I shouldn't say small, but they're supplementing it to some nominal fee. And then the contractor would propose what that cost above and beyond that would be to kind of, in their proposal to be able to provide that service. So that's number one. Number two is who's going to use the site. So right now, our previous contract was specifically for no cost to user or to residents, but it did allow for yard waste drop off from county residents, or I should just say non-Jefferson City residents, and then also commercial users, and allowed the contractor to charge a fee, also a nominal fee there. One change could be there is to limit it just to residents to kind of eliminate that extra there. We don't know exactly how much that nominal fee is covering the cost of providing that service for county and for commercial services. So if we wanted to narrow it down, make it a little more simpler and focused, you could look at eliminating the provision of those, and it wouldn't necessarily eliminate the contractor from accepting that material, but it wouldn't be something that we're going to have in our contract. Our contract would be focused a little more on resident only. The third thing would be hours of operation. So our current contract, again, they're open nearly 60 hours per week. It's something we could look at narrowing down the range of those hours. I think with a couple of our proposals, our low bidder did in fact reduce some hours. They were going to eliminate Sunday hours. And actually, the proposal we brought forward would eliminate Monday hours too. And that likely contributed to a little bit of cost reduction, I think, in the proposals that they submitted. So if we wanted to look at having a set minimum number of hours, right now it's just the hours of operation really of the business that was operated previously. We could set a minimum number of hours of weekend hours and weekday hours that it would need to be open, and that could also look at possible some cost reduction. And then the last thing is probably site. I think we got enough feedback, I think, from this last round that staff had kind of looked at, again, looking at some alternatives to kind of get some different proposals and perhaps some cost reduction. So we opened it up for north of the river. I don't think there was very much support for that, so we probably revised this again to keep it south of the river. We'd also open it up to any site within a mile of the city boundary. And so that's in the current proposal, so I think some feedback on that would also be helpful. So those are really the four. There are different things or additional things in the RFP. I'd be happy to get feedback from council right now, from the committee right now. There's things in there such as the scoring matrix that we use, and we revise that and work with our RFP team to kind of change that based on the parameters that we get back here. But those are kind of the four things I think I'd like to focus on today to get feedback on. The plan here would be to get the feedback from the committee today. Staff would then take some of that feedback and revise the RFP. Probably make that available for public comment between now and the December Public Works and Planning Committee, and then bring back the finished product for kind of a final evaluation in December. At that point, if the committee does give it the okay at that point, we would anticipate probably putting that out for bid before, or at least by the start of the next year. I think that would get us to a point where we could get our bids in and get it awarded prior to that May 1 target that we've kind of set.
Yeah, so for the option where the city devotes a subsidy and then the bidders are competing, so generally the information that would need to be included in that RFP is the amount of subsidy, and then what the bidders would be competing on is not on total price like on previous, but they would be competing on costs to residents. So it's somewhat like our trash contract where they weren't competing on how much it was gonna cost, overall. It was who can provide the lowest costs to the residents. So that's the matrix that particular model would be competing on. But it would require the city council to set that subsidy rate. How much do we want to spend annually to help defray those costs?
With that possible change, would we be looking at extending at least to a minimum of a 5-year contract? I mean, with renewals, obviously.
Yeah, I think the intent would be to leave that structure, I think, the same, but I think, if there's feedback there that we want to revise that to a lower amount, but I think 5 years, with the provision in there that really is subject to basically funding every year by the council. So it really is a year-to-year contract, so if city at some point wanted to stop the appropriation of funds at that point, it would cease.
The concern I have is I'd like to make sure that we establish the hours of operation so that the bidders are on level playing field. So I have no problem with the elimination of Sunday myself. I don't think that's a major issue. I know that was kind of some differences between the previous bids before, so I just would like to try to make sure that the service providers who bid on this have the same parameters that we're bidding on. Any other questions? Mr. Schwartz?
Scott,
Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
if I may, the most complaints I had was at the Sunday hours. Most of the people, at least on the east end, I know that's an older clientele and probably older trees, but their biggest concern was they had to be open on Sundays because they do their work on Saturdays, go to church, and then they want to go dump. So that was my only concern. I probably had more calls about the yard waste than I did about anything else.
Mr. Schwartz?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Jack on that. Weekends are big. I think of the 4 we talked about, site is the simplest. I think we've established that it can't be north of the river. And so I think that's settled. The hours of operation, I think what we have to find between 1, 2, and 3 is a balance of cost and convenience. And I think the cost of the 3 bids proposed in the last RFP are way too high for the city to afford, especially now. We're starting to see declining sales tax revenues because the amount of federal money that we've gotten is dwindling. And I think we're going to see a small tick back in sales tax. So that balance of cost and convenience, I think, boils down to 8 hours. I think what we currently do, we're finding out probably isn't enough. I think that's some feedback that we're getting. I think 60 hours a week is exorbitant. We don't need it. So I would like to find, as far as users, I'm fairly indifferent. Residents first. I think the bidder can do, if he has the land to do, pay as you go for county or companies. I think that's kind of up to them, but I think we got to find a balance between cost and hours. And I'm of the opinion that we could probably not even have it open Monday through Thursday and do either a 4 or 3 day time period, which would belay a lot of the cost and still have the ability to have folks that either work 410s, retirees, things like that, have a Friday option, and then of course be open on the weekend. So I would like to see a significant decrease in the hours per week, which I think will lead to a significant decrease in cost and leave the user option up to the bidder as far as how much land they have, et cetera. So just my 2 cents.
I think as far as site, I think having at least one drop-off site on south side of the river I think if Cordy had a drop-off site, to at least collect things that we probably would have, that bid probably would have gone. Another thing that I thought was important that didn't seem to be within the scoring process, Cordy was offering really more in terms of what they could handle the biggest things that Parks had to do for no extra cost, which really Parks was already doing 25,000 or more for that big stuff. And Cordy was going to do it as part of this contract with no extra cost. So to me, that was a big thing, but it wasn't seemed to be in the reckoning. So I think things like that are important.
I would say, if I can respond to
Yes, please do.
Councilman Lester real quick. I think, I mean, you're right, that wasn't specifically addressed in there. I think the team that did the scoring did acknowledge that was a benefit. And I think trying to incorporate that in the scoring of exactly what the category was kind of basically their operations, you know, and that's, but you're right. I mean, we have a lot of variables there. It does make it sometimes different to compare those apples to apples.
It was just to me, a significant cost aspect to the city that wasn't even in the process, so formally.
I agree with Councilman Lester in that I think at a minimum, we should have what is required to be taken. If a company can take more, then, you know, that's kind of on them. But I think at a minimum, we need a set standard to where it seems like last time the RFP, we had one bidder had 2 locations in the city, which would be super convenient, but his cost was about 20% higher, low bid. So, I mean, as much as we can get where we're all singing off the same sheet would be best. So I think for certain that a minimum standard for size, et cetera. Also, you know, what we do with the compost, what we do with the mulch, I think that's another thing. Some of them want to charge for it, some of them want to give it away. So anything we can nail down to make it the same standard for every bidder, I think is beneficial for us.
I agree. I think that's some good comments. Did you have a
Yeah,
response?
you know, I think I'd comment on the idea of what they do and how they process that compost, because right now I think the RFP, you know, asks feedback on how they'll be disposing of that. And I think that question I'd like to open up is that an important component to it? Because if we stayed silent on it, really, what's the objective of the yard waste? That's to allow residents to drop off. And, you know, we're kind of involving a little bit on how they process material, but if that's not important, we could eliminate some of that language out of the contract. I think there is some benefit to knowing that they'll be composting and making it available to residents, but I think that has come up a little bit as far as what's going to be available. You know, I know the current contractor did make some compost available, but not, I think, the mulch, and so there was a little, I think, confusion on what materials would be available when. So that might be something we might look at, say, it's important for us to kind of dictate exactly how they're disposing of that material, or is the important part just that they're receiving it and disposing of it in a lawful manner?
And I think also another component to this is the subsidy, in a sense of what is the subsidy paying for? Is it paying for the ability for Parks and Public Works to be able to take product to that site? Or is it to offset the cost of the taxpayer, and then therefore does that entitle them to, you know, getting a little bit level of increase of, you know, of services of getting that compost available and mulch and those kinds of things. So I think that's something we kind of need to nail down too, of what our true focus is on what the subsidy is going to actually provide and offset. So, and yes.
If I could respectfully push back a little bit, there may be some benefit before I open my mouth. So there may be some benefit in allowing for some creativity in the bidding. So I completely understand the desire to be able to compare apples to apples. But people that are in business aren't gonna be apples to apples, and their desire to enter into different markets that appetite is gonna be different. So I think realistically, you could find a person that says, I have no interest in being in the retail sales business, and I'll just give this stuff I'll give it away for free after I process it. Great. There could also be, people that are in business that say, I think there's a market there. I could bag it up and sell it, or I could sell it by the truckload. And in fact, I think there's enough of a market there that I can knock another $1 per bag off for the residents. So there is a theory that by allowing more areas for creativity, you could drive up the amount of competition and then ultimately drive down prices for the citizens. The evaluation becomes a lot more complicated. I will grant you that. So I think you guys have the difficult job of striking that balance. Complication between bids, being able to fairly compare them, and allowing enough creativity that they are competing on more than just margin. Because if it's just apples to apples to apples and apples, and everyone has to bid on the exact same thing, then all it becomes is who is willing to take the smallest margin. So just food for thought. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there, but I just want to make sure that there is a kind of alternative thought as opposed to trying to line up those criteria exactly.
And to share a little bit, or to agree with Councilman Schwartz's analogy too, with the long-term concern of paying for this service, I think what we're trying to accomplish with maybe the subsidy model is consistency, in the sense that we're not always looking at it from a year-to-year basis. If we lower that amount, considerably, then I think we extend the life of this service for the end users. So myself, I'm not really ready to maybe give you a number today on that, but I think giving us an opportunity to maybe talk about that as well. Any other comments?
Yeah, if I may.
Yes.
Personally, I don't care what they do with the debris, as long as they take it from the citizens and dispose of it legally. I think it's up to them. If they want to make some money on it, fine. If they just want to fill up their ditches, that's fine too. I think it's more cumbersome when we try to say, do you sell it? Do you give it for free? I think we're bending over backwards for the citizens now if we're trying to give them free mulch. I know it was a trade-off because we said no more burning, but we've got to look at our bottom dollar now. I just don't think we really need to put extra things in there, just a place to drop it, and you guys dispose of it however you wish. That's my feelings.
Good comments. Thank you, Councilman Deacon.
Mr. Chairman, just point of clarification, mentioned Public Works taking stuff to this site. I just wanted to make sure the committee is aware that, in my tenure, we've never, from Public Works, taken anything to the compost site. Most of our stuff we pick up is through our sweeping program on the street, and per our, policies and regulations, that becomes basically a waste that needs to be disposed of at the landfill. So, because it's mixed in with whatever could be else on the street. So we don't use this facility from a drop-off standpoint from Public Works. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
And I guess my comments about the parks and their bigger stuff. I mean, I know most of these providers, at least at the point of when we did this, couldn't even do that. So, I wouldn't want to make that a requirement, but it should be part of factoring in for sure.
And we could look at incorporating that into the scoring a little bit, as far as maybe services provided. There's a minimum that we set that you have to take from parks. And that's the way the RFP structured now is there's a minimum amount of loads that you will accept from the city and a minimum size, and maybe could be some additional supported if they were able to do, I think, that kind of next step up that we had discussed with Cordy. So we could look at trying to incorporate that in there a little bit, or maybe not points, but just, the preference would be to go to this level, but minimum bidders have to be able to accommodate that level. So And if Chairman wouldn't mind, I'm just going to kind of recap, I think, what we've received here today real quick, because we do intend to kind of put together and revise an RFP going forward. So I want to make sure we kind of got some of the feedback, I think, and understanding what the goals here and objectives would be. So I think hours of operation, trying to, again, and taking what Mr. Molman said into account as well, but perhaps setting a lower standard for the amount of hours that would be open. Maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday would be a minimum, so 4 days, so 2 weekend days and 2 weekday days would be the minimum amount of hours that we might require a proposal to include. Wouldn't preclude a business from being open longer than that. They could, add that as a little enticement in their proposal, but our standard would be for that lower set of hours. And if cost was a big component of the scoring, then bidders are going to have to balance that, kind of like what we're talking about. Do we want to offer more hours, or do we want to have a lower cost and have just those minimum hours? We'll keep Sunday, though. I think the consensus there maybe was to have Sunday in there. So again, we'll take out north of the river sites, but maybe the proposal would be that your processing site could be north of the river, but there has to be at least a collection site within the city and within or south of the river and within a mile of city boundary. One I'd like to get a little feedback is we might eliminate, and this could, I think, add to, again, the creativity that we're allowing contractors to look at when they're putting together a proposal. Make the minimum requirement just that you receive materials from residents. And they can then choose if they want to receive materials from others and how they would do that, but our main objective would be to receive resident materials. And then, talked about site location already. So, and then again, it would be perhaps the nominal city subsidy, and that amount is to be determined. And we might come back to council, full council then, as Mr. Molman had recommended to ask for that, what that amount might be. And then the bid process, really the key to the bid process would be asking what that charge to residents would be. And so that would be a large part of that evaluation. So I think that's what we'll take forward and draft a new RFP. And this is just that first listening session, so there'll be another opportunity to revise that in front of the committee and make sure you understand that. So you'll see it again before it goes out for bid. But that would give us a starting place, also give us a kind of that jumping off point to engage with a little more of the public to see if those kind of fits within what they're looking at, or to get feedback from them on what their standards would be. And to kind of jump on that too, we had put in the packet a survey that was done 5 years ago. And we included that because I think a lot of the same issues are probably the same. 5 years, isn't a lot of time as far as, I think, opinions on the yard waste. So I think it kind of informs a little bit about what residents are looking for. Kind of gives a little context, I think, for this conversation. But so you can look at that as you will. And then the last part, we did put on there the option 2. So we kind of felt it necessary to address the fact that the city is operating a short-term facility right now. There is the option that the city could look at and explore what a long-term option for a city-run facility would be. There's a lot of questions that still would need to be answered for that. But if the committee feels like that is a road they want to go down, we'd like to kind of get that feedback now. We kind of start exploring some of those. We have kind of a direction right now to move forward on the RFP. So it'd probably be good to pick one of those for now to let staff kind of focus on one or the other.
So is some kind of hybrid option even where the city just does the collection, and so we work with a provider that then takes it regularly and processes it.
I'd say that's probably similar to how we're looking at our short term right now. So the city does own the site, and we're kind of managing it. But we will at some point put out calls for bids to come in and process that material and essentially probably remove it or come up with some other alternatives to dispose of it. We might put something out to the community. If they'd like some of that, they could take it. We haven't kind of worked through all those details, so I don't want to promise anything right now. But most likely we'd ask in the bids for them to provide alternatives to remove and dispose of that material. And so that is essentially what I think a long-term program would also look like. There could be the possibility where we would acquire that equipment ourselves, but I think looking at probably what the most immediate solution would be is that we would bring in someone from the outside to process the material that we get once or twice a year and dispose of it.
Councilman Schwartz?
Yeah, and I just want to go back to kind of what Councilor Molman said, and just a little bit of what I'm thinking. I'm all about the free market. I'm all about creativity, but I think what we saw in the discussions about between the three bidders was that some of them were more creative than others, and their thought was that it cost them, and especially I think it was Alfred that had the site, the two locations. The cost was significantly more, and with cost being the biggest factor in the bid, I think he believes that it cost him. So while I'm all for creativity and competition, what I'm saying is we just need a basic minimum standard of this is what you're bidding on. Residents only, 4 days a week, and well, basically that's it. 4 days a week and residents only. And if you want to do county and all that, that's not part of the bid. So if you want to open a 30-acre site and try to make money on it, we're not paying for that. So I think that my point was basic minimum standard, and even to Councilman Lester's point, basic minimum standard on what you're going to accept, including size. If you have the ability with your equipment to take bigger, more power to you. But I think if we're all, like I said, singing off the same sheet, we're going to get comparable bids. And if you want to do 2 locations, then figure it out yourself. But
if there is a way we can communicate this prior to bidders, I think there is a desire, an appetite of county residents participating, and they know that they are going to have to pay for it. But so I think that is an untapped market. Maybe they could take advantage of. But I think, if at this moment in time, I'd really like to just see the private sector take this service on and move on, and then that's not receive proposals back to our satisfaction. I think we can always look at what I would agree with Councilman Lester, more of a hybrid city staff taking it on like we are currently now, having a site location and then bringing in a contractor to dispose of the product that's been disposed of. So, but I think, do you have enough to proceed on with something?
I think so, yeah.
Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, item B, parking rates. Mr. Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As memo in the packet explains, we've got basically 2 issues that we would like to discuss with the committee. The first issue involves the rates for our parking currently, and then the second issue is more of an operational. I'll try to discuss those in 2 separate ways so we don't mix the two, but there is a little bit of blend that I'll cover when we talk about operations. First off, as included in the packet was a proposed rate structure that we had developed when we were looking at a constructing of a new garage and using the News Tribune site. This is before the project kind of blossomed into something a little bit different, but this was a proposed rate structure that we put together which would support the construction of that garage. We don't know what that ultimately is going to look like at this point, and staff certainly understands that, but I believe we could all be in agreement that our rates that were set in 2005 are well past their prime. So what staff has proposed is that at minimum, we consider a rate increase which would generate approximately a 10% increase in revenue to try to step in. What I would fear is that, at some point down the line, we decide we need to raise rates to support whatever facility we're talking about, and that would include a large increase all at once. And that's tough for our customers to budget for. So we believe it's important that we maybe start stepping into a little higher rate, a little bit at a time, a little bite at a time. So at minimum, we would support the rate structure that we've included in the exhibit in year one, which would be approximately a 10% increase in revenue. What we did is apply a 10% factor to most of our rate structure, including fines and fees. With the exception of lot 1, we went with a little bit higher rate there. That is our most valuable lot. It's the one that sits next to the Jefferson building closest to the Capitol. Currently, we have a large waiting list, I believe, of about 100 people. I haven't looked at it the last couple of months, but we believe that one would support a larger increase right off the bat. So that is staff's proposal. And we might tweak that a little bit when we talk about the operations side, but I'd be happy to answer any questions of the committee on that particular point first.
Any questions? I guess I would like to see us move into more of a consistent increase model, whether that base is, every odd year or tied into some CPI or some formula based, and communicate that to well in advance. These rates could be changing effectively yearly. I agree with you. I think it's more palatable for customers, users, to anticipate smaller increases more consistently than one big increase, since 2005 and try and play catch up all at once.
I did, for an exercise, run the rates from 2005 and apply the CPI each year up to the year 22. And this 10% increase would be well below where we would be had we done that type of a model with CPI.
Questions?
Just, I understand the small steps now, but you're anticipating a bigger step, and how many years down are you thinking that would happen, and how big a step you're thinking that might be?
It's difficult to say at this point because we don't know what that's going to look like. All I can talk about is when we were proposing building a garage ourselves for about 330 spaces, we had proposed a rate structure that was over 7 years, and it was 10% each of the first 2 years and then 7% for the remaining 5 years to get us to a point where we could support, where the whole facility would, the whole division's revenues would support the construction of that 330 space garage. Now, how big a garage we're talking about, what kind of an increased revenue we're talking about if we get a convention center, those things are yet to be determined. So it's difficult to say now what we would be, but I am quite confident we will need at least this 10% increase and more down the road.
When would you implement, or what are you recommending to implement the 10%? Are we talking January? I mean, even before we're...
So certainly that would be up to the committee and up for discussion, but we believe that it's important to, this would take going to full council for a full vote. But yes, we can make it as of January 1 if that was, the council's decision. It could be at mid-year if we wanted to do that. But we just believe it's important to start making these steps. Otherwise, we're going to be way behind down the road.
I agree. But I guess another bigger discussion is with our parking strategy and infrastructure is, the parking meters. Do we really need parking meters here in Jefferson City, or do we use the technology that a lot of other communities utilize? And that's just basically the app system, and to where we eliminate.
That's the second piece of this.
Oh, great.
That's the operational piece I'd like to talk about.
Okay, well then, proceed on. Unless there's questions. Jack, do you have a question or anything on anything else?
No, I'm fine.
Now, I would just chime in a little bit. So Britt had this table in the packet that
see, and it's 7 year, and it's very similar to what we did in wastewater, where we had like, I believe it was a 7-year structure. The council passed the whole table at once, and that's kind of what you had mentioned. That's possible, but we don't know the final outcome, but we probably, this would be a good start anyway if you wanted to do that. But that's how we did it in wastewater. We said, okay, the council said, hey, this is a 7-year plan. We're gonna bond so many improvements off that in wastewater, so we need this financial plan implemented. So
Yeah, we just don't know
that's
the
kind of
back
a
end.
coming step, yeah,
We
coming.
don't know the back end number of what.
Right, we don't know that yet.
But we know we want to progress to get eventually to the back end number, and we're not going to know that for
A while.
a while, so.
But said January 1st seems like a reasonable time to
Or
start.
even,
to me.
you know, I would think get started, but if you have an appetite for it, we could do a 3-year plan or something like that, something minimal just to get going at a minimal cost if you wanted to, because I think, you know, time you get proposals back, it's gonna be a couple years yet. And instead of us coming back to you for the next 2 or 3 years, you could think about doing 3 steps in this if that's what y'all wanna do.
With our parking committee task force that the mayor has, we could probably present this to them at our next meeting, see what the appetite is, but, you know, get their input, suggestions, not necessarily the final. But Councilman Schwartz?
Yeah, this might be a little off topic, but I want to talk a little bit about parking tickets. And I would just ask Rick or Matt, I think parking tickets and parking offenses were created to manage parking. And so you have a busy street like High Street, you want to manage how long somebody's parked there. I've had a lot of complaints of on a Friday afternoon, somebody parked on Capitol Avenue, and there's not a single car on the block, and somebody's getting a ticket. To me, that's not the point of parking enforcement. I think there needs to be a little common sense injected. I mean, I heard the other day that we gave a highway patrolman a parking ticket in front of the Truman Building. To me, parking enforcement needs to be done in order, and I think January 1st is great. That's when session starts. That's when we see the most parking issues downtown. But I think we need some common sense injected into our parking enforcement in that if there's spots open and there's room for people to park, there's no sense in giving our citizens a ticket. That's just my 2 cents, getting a little off topic.
And is that accurate? Did we?
I do not know if we gave a highway patrolman a ticket. We would not ticket a marked patrol car. Did we give a ticket to an unmarked car that we don't have their license plate? That's possible. But we do not ticket marked law enforcement vehicles.
You want to proceed on to operations then?
Operations. First, I'll start off with why we're talking about this particular operation change right now. That's our garage management system is extremely outdated. It's run by a server that has got an operating system that is not supported anymore and is creating a cyber vulnerability to the city. So we're trying to figure out ways that we can eliminate that. We started with the vendor and talked through what it would take to upgrade our existing garage management. And it'd take hardware and software somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $75,000, which putting that kind of money into a garage that we're actually talking about demoing did not seem to make sense. So staff started looking and said, what other options do we have so we can eliminate the cyber vulnerability but still maintain our current operations as close to what we are now, if not better. And what we found is that we could look at, with our current parking parking enforcement vendor, they have a digital product that is, digital permits, where your license plate becomes your permit. And through that process, we could eliminate the gate and the booth within the garage. Our monthly customers would have a permit to park on the level that they would. We'd use similar enforcement techniques that we have now, with the addition of what is known as LPR, or license plate readers. in our vehicles. So it would increase the efficiency to the officers in that area and managing the garage. We could also then use hourly parkers would then use the app just like they would on the street. As Councilman Spencer started talking about, ultimately, I believe that we will eliminate all the meters on the street, and we could do that at any point with using the app. But that's really a decision of the council when you want to move that direction. Maintaining the meters is a cost. There is a cost to it. However, not everybody, most people are comfortable with using the app, but maybe not everybody. And so is it a good customer focus to allow them to still put some quarters in the meter as opposed to using an app? I personally would like to see us move to eliminating the on-street meters and everybody use the app. It would make my life a lot easier. And it also would improve enforcement. The operations of the enforcement would be a whole lot easier to manage as opposed to looking at meters and looking in the app to see if somebody is paid for their parking. But that decision doesn't necessarily need to be made today. But what we would like to do is talk about changing the operation of the garage. Now, if we go to this digital permit system, it would affect not only the garage, but all our surface lots. We would move the billing and management operations out of our finance department into our vendor. And the vendor obviously needs to make money. So there is a charge. The vendor charges to manage all the to manage the billing and operations. It's $4 per month per permit. That's their charge. That could be added as a convenience fee over and above the rent that we charge, or we could increase the rent to include that $4. And so that I personally think that it's tell the person up front what it's going to cost, not have them be surprised when they're at the checkout, in the system. The advantages that we would have to the user. Currently, we have a hang tag system where you'd have, at our surface lots, you have to move that hang tag from vehicle to vehicle. Often people forget to do that. They get a ticket, they show the hang tag, but it's a process that they have to go through to get the ticket voided. This would be, you could log as many license plates to your account as you want. However, you could only have one vehicle in the lot at a time. And LPR the license plate reader system would help us manage that. Also currently, if you stop paying your bill but keep using your hang tag, we have to go look for that 4-digit number on every car in the lot to see if we could find you because you're not now authorized, you're not paying the rent. LPR would eliminate that. And for the user standpoint, you could also set up auto pay. So somebody who's been parking in lot 26 for the last 20 years, they don't get a bill every month. It's just an auto pay straight to their account. I think there's a lot of advantages to going to this system. And as you said, it is the evolution of parking not only here, but everywhere that I've traveled around the country lately. Be happy to answer any questions about that.
Questions? Do you have anything else on parking?
I should have said, the last thing is that the cost would be slightly more than it would cost to upgrade the garage, but it would be the cost would be spread out and could be used into the future long after that garage is gone.
It's transferable, so to speak.
Yes.
To what degree would our rate hikes gonna cover these additional costs?
$4. $4 per month per permit.
So in most of
So at $70 currently in the garage, it's $70 a month to park in the uncovered area. The user would then be paying $74 a month. If we raise this and say that the rate now is $75 in the garage or $77 garage, it would be a $4 fee attached on top of that.
Above the 10% that we're recommending.
Correct.
Okay.
And if we don't do the 10% and we do this, I still recommend raising the rates at least the $4.
Yes. Also, just a couple items on this topic. Is there a way we get a spreadsheet of the parking in the current Madison Street garage as far as those parking spots? I know we've had that conversation when we hear about, we know we got contract spots and then we got lease spots, but we can kind of organize it to be kind of on one data sheet.
I could certainly add the leases to the spreadsheet that Sheila already provided.
That'd be great. Did you have any other suggestions on that or anything like that?
On the spreadsheet
Yeah.
you're asking for? No, what I provided to you were what I would consider to be the month-to-month. We still refer to them as leases. But I think what Britt is speaking of are the more long-term leases that we have with some of the state agencies. So if he could add those items to it, then that should suffice with what we've got listed in the parking garage.
Yeah, I think that would kind of clean things up a little bit and make it more understandable as well. And with the recent proposal with the conference center parking garage concept, are we working on a parking plan to see how we're going to address that if and when we get to the point of demoing?
Yeah, we've thought about various ways to do it.
We don't have to go to the specific state, but I just want to make sure. I want to assure the public.
It depends on how the phasing of that site would come out with any conference center. And if, for example, we could leave a little bit of it and use some of it, then we wouldn't have to use everybody. But if that's not possible, then we are talking about looking at maybe lots outlying or something and shuttling folks. So some of it depends on the developer of the site. A lot of it actually does.
Just want to assure the public that we're looking.
We've been thinking about that for quite some time, actually. Even with, let's say there is no developer, it's just the city doing this, we've been going through scenarios, how will we do this, for sure.
Mr. Sampson?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, we've already been having some conversations with developers on the conference center project, and the parking piece of it is probably the most difficult one to fund. The construction of that is going to have to all be done in conjunction with the conference center as part of that development, and it seems from the folks that we've talked with, there's a pretty good possibility that the parking garage long-term would, in order to finance that level of a project, may have to be more of operated by a third party in order to get that financing done. So, as far as the long-term operation of it, if I had to put a nickel on it, there's a pretty good chance that it might likely not be the city that's operating that in the end just to get that financing to work. That's what we're hearing from the development community. To Matt's point, as far as the staging goes, that'll be a conversation that is had once that developer is selected. Obviously, the availability of parking would be part of that discussion, and we would anticipate that would be thought of through their design process.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I'm good.
Any other questions on parking before we move on to item C?
Would you like us to progress this proposal, or you want to go through the parking committee first and then come back, or?
What's the committee's pleasure on that?
Anything we can do to move forward with something a little more technology driven is, I know we didn't specifically talk about meters per se, but we're quickly becoming a cashless society, and we've certainly become a coinless society almost overnight. So trust me when I tell you that I have to carry $10 in coins around during session is not something I enjoy doing. So I'm all for whatever we can do to move forward with something a little bit more technology backed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'd also like to point out, Mr. Chairman, that after having had conversations with Public Works about this would create some significant time savings in the financing department from the perspective of billing and also cash receipting. So at this point, finance generates all the bills for all of the parking lots and the parking garage. We also do all of the cash receipting for that. By turning this into an electronic process, there are some significant efficiencies there that we would have.
And you would fully endorse those?
Absolutely.
I appreciate your perspective because that is valued for sure. Well, I would entertain, if you like that as an action item.
Yeah, I would move to go forward with this proposal.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Councilman Spicer. For clarification though, the 10% plus the service charge, not joint, parsing that between the two.
Yeah, that sounds, that's our preferred option.
Sure. Got that motion, okay. Take a roll call vote on that.
Deacon,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Spicer.
Aye.
Schwartz.
Aye.
Spencer.
Aye. Motion passes. And then, once you get that kind of a proposal, we can present that to our citizens parking committee and educate them, inform them as well. All right, item C, trenchless sewer replacement.
Good morning. We are proposing to do a sanitary and storm sewer replacement using trenchless methods. Trenchless methods that we would typically use, we install a liner that is a flexible mat with resin in it into an existing sewer that has been giving us problems either through root intrusion, cracks, or offset pipes. And then we heat it up and it forms a solid PVC-like material inside the existing sewer. These new sewers do not have cracks. They will not leak typically, and they are stronger than either clay or the truss pipe that we are typically replacing in a sanitary service. Also for the stormwater, we do this in corrugated metal pipes and other older style pipes to restore it to a more smooth conveyance that will not form holes in people's yards or cause undermining of streets. The services in a sanitary situation are restored, are cut out, so there's no long-term cutoff of people's services. We take approximately 4 hours to cure, and once it's cured, we go back in, we cut the tags out where the services are coming in from the side, and then we reestablish everything for the people. So there's about a 6-hour disruption during a day for people on those sewers. We've done this in the past. As you can see, we've done them since 2005. There's been occasional sanitary sewer replacements, and they've ranged in price from about $750,000 up to about $2.3 million in the sanitary. We also just did one for stormwater about 1.5 years ago for about $500,000. So we're bidding sanitary and storm sewer together to get an economy of scale. We're doing about 36,000 feet of sanitary sewer, and the storm sewer is about, it says 2,500 feet, but I think it's a little high for what we're actually doing. And we're going for about $1.5 million to $1.8 million for the sanitary, and we're doing about $400,000 to $500,000 for storm sewer. The sanitary sewer is out of the wastewater loan that was just done earlier this year, and stormwater comes out of the sales tax, the capital improvement sales tax. While we're bidding them together, we also have the flexibility to award multiple contracts. The last one that was done with sanitary actually broke, they had a sanitary and stormwater one in 2019, and that one broke out into 3 different contracts because we actually got, I believe, two different contractors across 3 contracts to get the lowest bid. So it does, breaking them up does help with that. Customers are generally notified at least 48 hours prior to work. We also ask that the contractor give the city 2 weeks' notice of where they want to go and who they're going to disrupt, so we have time to contact them as well. We ask the residents minimize their water use for a period of 8 hours, generally a work day. We ask they can use the restrooms. That's not a problem. Restrooms, hand washing, all the normal sanitary things that people do, not a problem. But we ask that they don't use their dishwashers, wash dishes, or do anything that, washing machines, anything that uses large quantities of water. No baths, if we can help it, because it does, eventually it will back up. So the pipe only has so much capacity, and if you're using it for black water, sanitary usage, then it generally won't get, it will not get in the home. But once you start using other forms of water use, we're going to have some issues as we have time to get this liner installed and cured inside the main sewer item. We also issue press releases weekly to cover streets where the work is conducted. That's part of the 2-week notice that we get from the contractor. The inspection and coordination will be handled by the wastewater utility from the city. That has been done in the past. Our proposed schedule right now is we will receive bids the 3rd week of January, and we will have should have the final red contract before the end of February. And the construction is going to take about a year. There's 36,000 feet of sanitary sewer, and if you think about it, you can only do 400, 500 feet a day if you're lucky on that. So it's going to take, with you can't do it while it's raining, and there's all these other restrictions. So it takes quite a bit to coordinate and get these installed.
Any questions?
I think this is more informational really, but it's a big project that's coming. We're getting ready to, spend quite a bit of money here. It'll be first of the year. We'll have this contract before the council. We just want to kind of give you a heads up on it. People do notice the smell occasionally, kind of a blue-like smell, I think we say, kind of strong if we're in your neighborhood. We've done this a lot, but people wonder about it some. So we just want to kind of give everybody a bit of a heads up. And again, including the stormwater has been really successful in the past, doing it this way. We also don't tear everybody's yard up. You'd be surprised how particular people are about maybe just their grass even in their neighborhood. They really like their lawn and they don't want us to disrupt it. And so this helps us with those issues, driveways, et cetera. We don't have to tear all those things up to put them back. So these are expensive, but we don't have to do all that restoration on the other hand.
Any questions? All right. Thank you very much for the presentation this morning. All right, item D, High Street Viaduct Preferred Option Discussion. Mr. Morash.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we have a PowerPoint, and we have Todd here from Bartlett West as well. And I'll let Todd just run through the slides really fast. We had a meeting. Before he does that, I'll describe the meeting. We had a meeting Tuesday evening, 4 to 6, open house type meeting. It was fairly well attended. I think a lot of, in this case, there's nobody living directly next to it, so we probably didn't have an attendance like we do in some other things. But we did receive 10 written comments back, and of course then took feedback during the meeting. And just for me to summarize that, Todd's going to go through these options, but about 3 people wrote back that they feel like the city probably should pursue option 2 or 3 that Todd's going to talk about. Had a couple favor option 1, which is basically reconstructing what we have. Another comment about greenway connections. We actually had one person indicate they'd like to see the removal option, fully remove the bridge and go with that option, option 5. Again, people talking about pedestrian accommodations at the state. I think we sent these out in email to you. Angie's been collecting them, sending them out. And then a couple, they didn't want to see the state parking affected at all. But when we do something this large, we're certainly going to affect our neighbors. One thing I would say, we haven't got any official feedback from Office of Administration at the state. So that's kind of after this meeting, I know Brian Crane, City Administrator, and I we've been talking about that. We need to get on their calendar and really get their feedback too. But I think from our standpoint, we feel like we can get a preferred option, at least out of this group, and keep moving forward on this. Just from a staff standpoint, I'll just go ahead and say, after weighing all these considerations, attending the meetings, talking with our consultant, we really think we're probably we would recommend option 2, 3, some combination of option 2 or 3, which is really kind of hits all the things of, it helps traffic flow, it helps pedestrians, and it's kind of that, it's a little bit lesser cost than just replacing exactly what we have. So with that, stop, and I can let Todd just kind of run through the options again. He did this last meeting, I believe, but just to get it fresh in everybody's mind again. Any comment?
Sounds good. Yeah, last meeting we went through this in quite a bit of detail, but I'll go through them high level and then happy to answer any questions anybody has about any of the options. So as Matt mentioned, we have 5 options. Option 1, I would classify to be essentially, let's put back what's out there today. Leave the kind of, I call it a slip ramp kind of configuration that you have between High Street and Missouri Boulevard, and put a bridge back that spans Missouri Boulevard. This is the only bridge that we do have that spans the railroad, the creek, and Missouri Boulevard. All the other ones eliminate the Missouri Boulevard span and create an intersection there.
Oh, just real quick, we did meet with the school officials at St. Peter and the church, and they seem to favor basically having one of these options where you have a turn lane into their facility. They obviously, any school gets backups, but they do every day. And so with these option 2 and 3, we can also accommodate some turn lanes into their facility and not have that weird angled slip ramp situation going on.
Yeah, that center turn lane is not shown right now, but we'd probably widen the eastern side of High Street coming out of that roundabout signal, whatever goes there, and make a turn lane. So as I said, the other options do create, whereas Missouri Boulevard currently goes under High Street, essentially we would raise Missouri Boulevard up. We're raising it about 7 to 8 feet and then lowering High Street down a little bit. So High Street Bridge gets a little bit steeper. We don't want to bring it all the way down to Missouri Boulevard elevation for multiple reasons. 1, it gets extremely steep at that point. And 2, we try to hold what the intersection, which is shown as a roundabout in these versions, we held that at a flood elevation so that High Street maintains a 100-year flood passage throughout any storm event. So that kind of created those intersection elevations. This option basically is, let's put an intersection there like I was talking about, but put as big a bridge in as we can. So basically, as soon as we get out of the roundabout and can kind of get to back on a bridge, we're putting a bridge in, which then allows us to span Weirs Creek where it currently exists today. I continue to tell people at the public meeting, and I'll remind you all, the intersection type hasn't been studied a ton. We show a roundabout and all the options. Partly, we don't want any of this discussion to be, hey, I like a roundabout versus a signal, and that's what's deciding it. We wanted to decide the bridge, and then if we know if an intersection is going there, we can have more discussions. We do think a roundabout's a good option here, but I just didn't want to make this a roundabout versus signal or other intersection type because those get contentious as they are. So this is an $11.4 million option. I didn't mention it. The other first option was about $12.3 million. Maybe. Not advancing.
Grant, can you get us the next slide?
Yeah, go 2 forward. I don't know if battery ran out or what.
Yeah, this is option 2.
Yeah.
Here it comes. It worked once, I guess. He's got it up here. Oh.
So when we get to option 3, you will see it is extremely similar to option 2. The difference is we shorten the bridge. I'll go back a couple. Yep. So there's option 3. Essentially, the difference between these, again, same intersection, but we shorten the bridge as much as we can, and this essentially would require us to realign the creek. So if we realign Weirs Creek, we can get to this short of a bridge, and we're showing about a $10.8 million cost, which does include some decent costs for stream realignment. However, that's a big variable. We have not talked to the Corps. We wanted to get public and city feedback before we engage the Corps on this. So that's a pretty big variable there. There's an advantage of this of we don't have any piers in the creek. If you look at the current bridge, there are columns in the creek. The first one, or option 2, we are going to struggle to get all the columns out of the creek. So the Corps is not going to love that. They're also not going to love the stream realignment. So we're going to need to talk to them. I've been affectionately saying there's probably an option 2.5 or something in here where essentially we're combining the two options. We're working with the Corps to figure out how short we can get this bridge and where costs are most efficient. So I would say this is the shortest we can get a bridge. The other one's the longest we can get a bridge.
Flip back to that one.
Yeah.
Just to remind everybody what you're talking about.
So this is the longest we'll ever get a bridge and have an intersection there. My guess is the best option somewhere in between, and those are the boundaries we'll work within. We wanted to give the extremes somewhat to see the cost. You're seeing 11.4 on this longer bridge. If we go forward to the shorter bridge, it's 10.8. In the grand scheme, I'd say those are pretty similar costs. So my guess is this is where we'll end up unless you all have different feedback, and we'll work with the Corps to come up with the most efficient bridge solution.
Like I said, these, that 2.5 that Todd and we were joking the other day, we'd call it is somewhere, this is our recommendation really, to go with one of these two options, somewhere in between more than likely. But that would be our recommendation for the committee.
If the Corps is really happy to work with us, maybe we can get all the way to this option. But if they don't love this, we'll come up with something a little bit longer.
And we haven't mentioned these are over the railroad as well. There's a railroad under there, so you got to remember that. So.
Yeah, you see that especially on this option 4, which is essentially to put a box culvert under all of this. You kind of see this at Missouri Boulevard and 50. Weirs Creek goes into a box culvert. You don't see it through the big intersection there, and then it pops out on the other side. We could do the same thing here, essentially hide the creek. I think David Bangy refers to it as bury the creek. We could do that. This option ended up being the most expensive, that box culvert. A lot of concrete, a lot of length. So it wasn't quite as cost effective as we had hoped, but this gets us the absolute shortest bridge possible, where you are only spanning the bridge over the railroad. You're only spanning the railroad. So you have a short span bridge and everything else is in that box culvert. But we went up to almost 13 million with this option. And then the final option did have, I guess, one. I didn't recognize this during the discussion, but I guess we got a written comment that said someone preferred this, and it's basically take the bridge out. So get rid of the High Street Bridge. We did include in this option, after working with the city, we felt like we should show something here, but there is a concern that I know people have of, again, if you think back to the 93 flood, High Street was the way across the city here. So if we get rid of it, what happens in a big flood? So we are showing Main Street being raised to flood elevation. So Main Street goes up, we replace that bridge. I will note there are concerns about tying in driveways and properties. I think about the Mill Bottom. Everybody's probably pretty familiar with that site. We are having to raise Main Street about 3 to 4 feet. If you go look at Mill Bottom and you imagine it going up 3 to 4 feet, it's going to be pretty tight, and you're probably going to be like the window. You're going to be walking at their window elevation, so you're probably going to end up with some walls and some difficulty to tie it in, but we can investigate that more if this option's desired.
One thing I would say about this, we've also heard a lot from the state on occasion about changing their traffic flow, cutting streets off, so we'd be dumping traffic right into there. And we did look up traffic numbers finally. We finally found them. We couldn't find them for a while. I think we had about 2,300 coming down the High Street Viaduct two-way.
Yep.
And then once you got to the other side, closer to St. Peter's and Truman, it went up to
3,700.
3,700. That's what it was. So just kind of give you a level of traffic in your head there.
Yeah. Over the bridge, it's just a little over 2,000. Finally, I didn't hit it on these, but the pedestrian side, because that is something that, you know, is being addressed as part of this project, possibly. With these options where we raise Missouri Boulevard up, because we're raising up, there should be less desire to cross Missouri Boulevard here, because they're gonna maybe have to climb up the road's gonna go up 3 to 4 feet, so hopefully they're not as interested in climbing over that to get from one side of the parking lot to the other. And we are then, to help with that and to help with all the people that currently cross Missouri Boulevard going to that western parking lot, we're showing a box culvert. You can kind of see it right south of the roundabout, but basically because we're pulling that up, we can fit a pedestrian tunnel essentially under that. So we do believe there's some decent pedestrian safety. And I think during the public meeting, we were discussing ways we could even enhance that more. I think we talked about we could put a barrier down the middle. We show an orange barrier go for a kind of island. That could be a raised island so that people can't cross, and kind of forces people to that culvert or to the McCarty signal to somehow cross Missouri Boulevard more safely than the free-for-all that kind of happens at certain times of day right now. What questions you all have?
The pedestrian enhancements, so let's say for version 2.5.
Yep.
Those are significantly improved.
Yes, it would include that. We show it as an optional. You do not have to do the tunnel, but I assume the state would like it. I assume people generally like it. So that is included, and people would have that tunnel to go through. It also create a full intersection access at Missouri Boulevard and High Street. So if you wanted to head west on High Street, you would be able to do that much more easily than you can right now.
You know, like all our projects, we always have pedestrian accommodations, and we know that, you know, this is a high traffic pedestrian area, there's no doubt. And so with that'd be forefront that we should include something. I think it's also a good part of a grant proposal, as well as a state interest that we hear a lot from them.
Well, that was a concern when we met with OA in August.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'd like to try to alleviate
And
some
these costs have that.
Correct. That box, that tunnel is in those costs.
How much is it, Todd?
I don't remember that one off the top of my head. I could take a shot, but somebody's going to put me in the paper, so I'm not going to take a shot.
You know, we certainly need OA or the state or whoever, however you want to say it, participating, you know, with us in this project.
Absolutely. Any questions, comments? Does anybody have any preference of design? Head them off in a direction?
I like 2 or 3 best. I would say, given that this is one of the main entrances to the city, I think the bridge should look a little better than the bare bones bridge. And I would think the state would be interested in that too, and we should see about their helping fund some of this.
Well, like on Dunklin Street Bridge, you know, we'll have to have a railing to keep people from on it. If they're walking, we'll have to have pedestrian accommodation. You know, like any city project, it includes some type of lighting. And so those are kind of typical enhancements we'd see with bridges. Bartlett and West was our designer on the Dunklin Street Bridge as well. So you can kind of, it doesn't have to mirror that, but you know, you can kind of see what can happen. And it was a fairly low cost improvement to enhance that. So a little bit.
Yeah, I would like to see something like that.
Okay. Well, I think we're comfortable with.
So the committee endorses 2.5 somewhere.
Yep.
And I guess the next steps, Brian and I talked about this briefly. Probably ought to give the whole council the presentation. Is that a good idea from your perspective? So we can do that at a next meeting or so, and then start meeting with other partners. I know Bartlett and West, you know, in their current contract would refine this design and start having those meetings with the Corps, et cetera. Todd and I talked about that briefly. I think by spring sometime we're talking about having that pretty well refined. They also have somebody on staff here locally that is into the grant side of things, especially according to these type projects. And so they'd start thinking about options that we could pursue as well as other things as well. Not leaving anything out, Todd? So that's kind of a time frame, but I'd like to get before the council. Oh, and then the city administrator and I talked about go ahead and meeting with other partners, of course, and keep pushing that avenue and letting them know what's going on. So,
County representatives, you have any comments or?
I think the cul-de-sac is a crazy idea. How about that? But 2.5 or 2.6 or 2.4 is probably the sweet spot. That's just one commission member saying that. The engineer might have another idea.
Sometimes you gotta show a little out there type ideas to kind of refine down to the one you really want. So I think Todd and Bartlett and West did a good job laying out different options. And I think the 2.5 some version makes sense. And
there was a county commissioner I'd point out that was really in favor of 5 at one point. He's not there.
I mean, you look at how that changes the whole dynamic of that whole area. I mean, this is an amazing project, and I know there's some money maybe in the sales tax for this cycle that can be used. It's not enough, but if it's at all possible to find the additional money somehow and get it done in this current cycle would be amazing.
And which kind of leads us to, or a quick comment is that we've got a lot of projects on the horizon, and we really, really need to start continuing that discussion of the capital improvement sales tax extension from that 5-year financing model to 20 to 25. We've got to have the ability to bond some of these big projects. And having that cloud of uncertainty of, even though the performance record of a capital improvement sales tax has been, approval rate's been high 70s, low 80s approval rating. So it's historically been very well supported, but we just need to have that ability to bond these projects. We're just getting further and further behind. So, and I know the county's looking at that as well.
Sales tax, future sales tax, a couple of years out, so we're getting to the point to start having those conversations. So,
because I'd like to have it that buffer in case it, the sentiment wasn't there for that strategy, then we're still fine. So, any other comments on High Street Viaduct?
Just for the county's sake, we probably need to get up and give the other commissioners the same presentation, so not to leave y'all out. Glad you could make this one though.
Again, we always appreciate the county support and partnership in these projects. Item E, City County Project Update.
Yeah, thank you. On that one, David Bangy, you might notice his absence today. He does a lot of this talking instead of me usually, but so our city engineer is out with a knee surgery, started this morning, actually. Might be done by now.
See those bikes, just
I told him he's gonna put me in a big inconvenience if he has any more wrecks, but anyway. So anyway, he drafted this up real quickly, and it's luckily Eric is here because he's Eric Landwehr, as County Public Works Director, is working on a couple of these projects more so than us. But we thought we'd just give you kind of an update real quick. I think you got the CART facility update just last meeting from Eric, so we included that on there. But Monroe Street, we've been talking about. We're still focused on doing that first section from the highway past Dunklin there a little bit. The Tia Griffiths, our designer here, she's here sitting here in the audience. I think we're it's indicating about 50% design mark, but we anticipate that going out to bid here in the spring and being worked on and completed this next calendar year. So that's one big project that's happening. Again, city-county project. Wildwood, Eric is probably more in tune to this than I am, but what I've been hearing lately, we had some issues. We had to work on the bridge a little bit. I think Bartlett and West is helping on that actually, on the bridge there right beside Wildwood. So we're kind of looking at that again to get it updated to current flood standards, etc. Working with the Corps. It'd been such a long period that had to be changed. So that probably has slowed the project some, but we're also looking at the roundabout, tweaking it up above. I know there's been a lot of emails going back and forth about it with the designers, how the traffic flow is going through that. And so, Eric, we're saying still towards probably summer, end of the summer, maybe. Is that right?
Well, kind of depends on this bridge issue, if you want to call it that. We originally had a concrete arch structure sized to span Weirs Creek, and the FEMA flood maps changed between 2008 and 2010 and then now, which is an unfortunate situation that you get into when projects sit for a while, but it is what it is, and we're moving on. So Bartlett West is doing the flood study or hydraulic study to determine the type and size of the structure needed. And with today's issues with the storm water through there, could be a bridge. However, the cost for a concrete arch was getting pretty high anyway, and so you might not see a tremendous cost increase with going with a bridge if that's the chosen alternative. Other things are moving along good. We were still kind of projecting possibly a February bid time. Obviously, a bridge, having to design that, if that's what we have to do, is going to slow that down. It's going to cost a little more to design it, but that will get the project complete. And if we got to wait till more summer to bid it, so be it. It's kind of a standalone new road. It's not going to impact traffic tremendously, except up at Frog Hollow and Rock Ridge, and we can coordinate that to where that's done at the right season. And if it's got to go into the next year, it does. Working with the developer, we've had meetings with him as well, and things are progressing on that. And those two kind of got to go hand in hand. So I think everything's moving as it should. A little later, big time than what we originally planned.
Yeah, and on that fill, that's kind of the developer deal where, there's probably some agreements you'll have to accommodate there with him, and so that probably is going to take a little more time as well. So. Any questions about that, especially since we have Eric here? Okay. Really, we talked about High Street Viaduct. There's no time frame to bid that. As you might remember, to do some of these other projects, the group did shift money out of this project, so we don't have that money right now sitting there other than the design contract. So we may need to revisit that issue if something were to materialize soon. But I just want to point that out, that money was shifted away from there. So Stadium Satinwood, we heard from several residents nearby there recently. Again, we're trying to do this internally in-house and with our own designers. And so we're coming up with some options. We'd meet with those homeowners now with all the knee surgeries going on and things happening. I'm going to have one in December, by the way. But that'll take a little bit to get together once David's back and get those folks in here and meet with them. Then we'd have another more general public meeting for everyone because it is not just for the neighborhood. It's through corridor for the city, arterial street. Even so, probably settle on what a preferred option, similar to this High Street viaduct process, hone in on a preferred option, then start the design, then start looking. We always look for grant opportunities with all these projects, whether it's just for the pedestrian things. Those are sometimes easy to pick off, but there may be other things we could do there. Again, if that all materialized and the money is still there and utilized for this project, summer of 26 is probably the time frame for that to be bid. These do take a while to get together. There are probably some right-of-way still. There's a stormwater component to this that we'll have to work on, doing a little bit more study on. It's a known flood area, so that takes a little more time to put together. So that's kind of that schedule. Madison Street, we briefly talked about a concept last time. That was just a concept, of course, so we'd need to hold some more meetings similarly, get the public input. That probably occur in 24. Refine concepts, make sure we have our money still together after we get some of these larger projects, keep them going. And this would probably be one towards the end of the sales tax within 27. A lot of those things, again, our two designers are here today. We have two people in office that do these, and if we can do them in-house, we'd like to save a little money. We have our own survey crews, that kind of thing. So some of that design time, they're also, as you know, just
heard today, designing other projects like storm sewers and wastewater projects, et cetera. And so that design time, as well as sales tax cash flow are a big part of this. So we work with Eric to make sure our cash flow is in place. But that's kind of where we're at. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Any other old business? I do have one quick question. I've been getting some concerns, complaints on issues with ducks on Sherman's Hollow. Not the conventional ducks, the
ducks.
I
thought you
ducks. It's my understanding that was kind of a potential temporary, see how it went, how it's received, and from my perspective, it's not been received well by folks in the neighborhood. So just wanted to put that on your all's.
And also the wintertime cleaning of that area I think we're anticipating we'd like to pick those up anyway, just through the wintertime. Then during that process, this winter, I think Tia was involved in that at Transportation and Traffic Commission. We had a group of neighborhood people lobby for that, pick that up, and we can then go back and see what our traffic counts are, see what effect it had, kind of study that a little bit, and see what the neighborhood feeling is about that. So I'd say, what's our first snow average? I can't remember. December 5th or something like that. It seems like.
Yeah, we ban singing White Christmas in this town, so generally speaking, we've seen them as early as now, but generally speaking, it's a January time.
We start occasionally getting little episodes in December, so I'd say we'll have to be thinking about removing that pretty soon.
Okay, Councilman Schwartz.
Councilman Spencer brought something to my attention. When you said ducks, I'm thinking deer, which I actually mean deer. Just for the committees, and I think some of you have been on the emails, we've been in discussions with Mr. Marash, Mr. Smith. We've had a lot of complaints from especially residents in the Fifth about deer overpopulation, eating gardens, vegetation, destroying property, et cetera, et cetera. We've had conversations with the parks, with conservation department within the last 24 hours. The idea is to pursue essentially some sort of a hunt, maybe on some parks grounds, including, and Councilman Deacon's gonna be mad at me, including Binder Park and
it was a long eye.
yeah, and potentially the golf course for some managed deer hunts. So those are things we're pursuing. We're hearing our constituents, and I agree there probably is an issue with deer population in the city limits. So just FYI, we're looking at some of those things behind the scenes to maybe try to get a little bit of a handle on our local herd.
Now, as a joke, okay, I want to preface this as a joke. Do we have a building permit for deer stands fee in the city?
Not yet.
Not yet. Any comments? Any other comments?
Do you want to talk about the compost facility since we're here? Had some email traffic. I mean, not the compost facility, the drop-off site, the temporary site.
I mean, I thought we pretty much had that.
He means like
Modifying some time frame.
Change. Oh, okay. Yeah.
We didn't cover that on number one, but I'm just for the temporary site, I'm saying.
Yeah. Any comments on that?
And I reached out to Matt and others on the committee we've been getting a lot of feedback, at least I have, that it's not enough hours. My suggestion was to add a 4-hour block on Friday to kind of cover 410 workers, retirees, to kind of spread out a little bit of the weekend traffic. I think we've had discussions about an expanded Friday operation and eliminating Sunday. My personal opinion is we're going to get a lot of pushback on that.
Can't eliminate Sunday.
So I would like this committee to figure out a way to fund and figure out how we add 4 hours on Friday, beginning with the November 18th, 19th weekend. So that would be my suggestion. Figuring out manpower. I think obviously funding will be an issue because we are saving quite a bit of money on this, but manpower is going to be a real issue. I suggested maybe talking to parks. They might have some people in parks maintenance that maybe aren't as busy now that the summer's over, but that's a discussion probably that needs to be had between the city administrator and parks director. So just options. I just think we need maybe another 4-hour block.
Just a quick update from our perspective after doing it just the one weekend, of course, and we didn't know what we would expect. And so we had originally think, okay, we'll probably be able to do this with 1 or 2 folks. If our traffic is like it currently was over the weekend, we think 3 is really the best solution. And I think one of the issues is on the drop-off area, we do have to move that around a little bit with a Bobcat. And so that's, we have somebody checking in, but when you have citizens around your work zone, kind of need one on the ground and one in the machine. You don't want anybody sneaking up on a guy in a Bobcat because that's not a good situation. And so we're probably needing 3 people out there all the time. So that's a little more than we thought. So that's 6 people or 6, individuals that we'll need on Saturday and Sunday. That does stretch the crews pretty thin, of timeframes to get through the end of January. We could certainly, if the productivity, that's what I was indicating, we could shift a crew on Friday to work the site essentially almost a full day. It's a productivity loss, but if it helps on the weekend thing, that might be a good thing. We can back those people off at least. The other thing we've mentioned, I don't know how widely known people think about it, but you get to December again, you get this cold weather coming. We don't know what this, weather events are going to do. Those are the same people that are typically working night shifts to plow snow or ice or whatever we end up having. And so, kind of all bets are off when that happens anyway. And they always seem to happen at night when we're doing these things. But, having that Friday available, may mean that out and we can, reconvene here. Maybe this dies down a little bit in December anyway with the holidays coming and everything. That's another factor, so.
Yeah, I agree.
We could do something to not do Sunday or something and do Friday. That would be our preference. Just want to throw that out there. I've seen some of you say, well, it's going to be tough not to do a Sunday, but maybe we can revisit that here at the end of the month or something.
I think we understand it's kind of fluid, it's based on demand, but I think if it would help, especially with the recent weather we've had, giving an opportunity for people to dispose during the week, Friday might be beneficial.
So I'm just curious about the nature of the complaints. My understanding, when I talked with staff on Sunday, they talked about one period where there was kind of back up, but it didn't sound like other than one time. Was that the nature of the?
Yeah, I asked on Nextdoor how to go, thoughts. I think the reaction was it went fine, but we need more options on hours. I wouldn't say they were complaints. I more asked for suggestions. Now there were some complaints, but
so it was about hours.
It was about hours, and I just think if we can figure it out, and I don't know if the parks thing will work, but if we would offer the retirees and the 410 workers just an option on Friday, and maybe it's just 2 hours. I don't know, but or maybe Marash said, maybe we do a 6-hour block on Friday, but I don't know. I don't know if there's a magic bullet or not.
And how much can we try and then adjust if
Well, if demand falls off, I would think it would, but I don't have a crystal ball. And maybe with all the warm weather we were having, that really, all the flower beds had already died and people were bringing everything. Maybe that demand will wane. I don't know that, but.
Is there an option for, probably not enough time, but, a lot of these landscaping companies slow down this time of year. Is it an option for temporary workers to hire temp workers for 8 weeks?
We have a hard time finding any workers, so, I mean.
Well, we contract with a company, you mean, to do it and let them find the workers. Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea. We can look into it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may,
Yes, sir.
my thought was we were willing to pay $17,000 a month to the previous contractor without negotiations. That is what we offered him. Why don't we offer our present staff an incentive $20, $30, $40 an hour to work on a Sunday? We're still saving money, and it gives some of the laborers money to make for Christmas. That was my thought. Go ahead and, we're still not going to spend $17,000 a month. But give them a good wage, 30, 40, 50, even more an hour, and they could make some money. We would save some money, and also my biggest complaints are Sunday afternoons. People want to have Sunday afternoons, but that's just my thought.
Paying $50 an hour, I'm doing it.
I guess, probably Brian and I need to talk about it, city administrator and I, and go from there and see what we come up with. But I guess the feeling is we maybe need some more hours and kind of a general direction.
I think that is the sentiment of this committee, that we would like to see an hours option during the week, not just isolated to the weekend.
It's easy for us to be a little flexible from my perspective on that. If you tell me you need more hours during the week, then we can work on what best fits with our workload and everything, and then I can work with the city administrator maybe, and we'll publicize it and go from there. So I think that's enough direction for us, if you will. And we may come up with an option, perhaps we can explore talking to some companies and see if they're willing to operate the site for us on a full day on Sunday for a contract.
What I was gonna ask is, what technical expertise do you need from your staff? Is it a volunteer opportunity for like the Environmental Quality Commission that seems to be looking for ways to serve?
The thing is making sure they show up. Right. We can make sure our staff shows up. If they're assigned, they will show up. Or there's a chain if they happen to get sick or something, then the supervisor knows to plug in another person. Also with the equipment, running equipment, we obviously prefer that be a couple staff members. We have a little iPad thing that it's not hard to train somebody on that, obviously. But if something happened out in the street, it's kind of nice to have somebody that has some wherewithal to maybe, what if we have a load, we're thinking through all the scenarios. The load happens to get dumped in the street by accident. We have people there to stop traffic, get it out of there quickly and move on. Things like that, it would be nice to have some control either through a contractor or our own staff to kind of do that. Volunteers always sound good, but sometimes when you're running equipment and something like this, it's having a point of responsibility is also good.
That's not my preferred option by any means.
Okay. So we'll work. We can talk about it, work on what that looks like.
All right, I think we're ready for reports. Lindsay with neighborhood service grant updates.
Here, Katrina. I'll use them. Good morning. Give you our monthly update of the grants that we have in neighborhood services. Grant, can you click and then, there we go. Okay. So as usual, any updates since the prior month is highlighted in yellow. We're going to start with our entitlement funds with our Community Development Block Grant, otherwise known as CDBG. That funding for this year, we are spending down $290,506. That again, this program feeds into a 5-year plan. We're on the final year of that 5-year plan. We have met our down payment assistance goal. So far in 2023, we've provided 10 home buyers with down payment assistance of $5,000 per. We also have the emergency home repair program. And I wanted to kind of go over that program with you all in case you have homeowners that contact you that need help with emergency home repair. So this program offers up to $5,000 for true emergencies. So we do a lot of sewer lateral replacements. We do a lot of HVACs. We do a lot of roofs and gutter systems as well. And just to give you an idea of the eligibility requirements that come with that, it is a low to moderate income program. One person in the city of Jefferson qualifies if they make $49,000 a year. A family of 4 is $70,000 a year. So that really does capture a wide audience in our city. Currently, we are working with 2 applicants on a sewer lateral replacement and a porch replacement. We also have voluntary demolitions that we work with property owners on, also with nonprofits. So we currently have 1320 East Miller. That property is owned by Habitat for Humanity. Excuse me. And we basically we demo the property in exchange for them building a new home. So we eliminate some of the slum and blight within the city. We are also currently working on the environmental review for the old animal shelter in conjunction with parks, doing work along that park. That's right next to it. Another condition of our CDBG is that we are required to update our analysis of impediments of fair housing choice once every 5 years. We are working with RKG, who is the same consultant that conducted our housing study. That draft is 95% complete, and we'll share with this body once it is fully complete. Last council meeting, we went ahead and accepted the FY23 funds that we will use for program year 2024. Our consolidated plan, which is that next 5-year plan, all of our community engagement pointed to housing. So we're going to open up every activity that we can towards housing for our next 5 years of our entitlement fund. We have a few hiccups with our data, but as soon as we get that draft completed, we'll put it out for public comment, and we'll let this body know as well so that you all can comment on it as well. Our CDBG CARES Act funding that we received through entitlement, all of our programs are completed except for one. 211 Oscar Drive, currently, they just recently received their authority to use grant funds, or otherwise the notice to proceed. And they're going to do a building expansion onto their daycare so they can take in more kids. CDBG disaster recovery, the multifamily with LIHTC, we had the 2 proposals. One did get a letter of intent for CDBG disaster recovery funding. But the public hearings for MHDC were held November 1st and 2nd. LIHTC recipients are announced by the MHDC Commission, usually that first or second week of December. So we should know shortly when that meeting is going to be scheduled. We also sent out a request for quotes for housing counseling services. This is a required activity that we need to have both with our CDBG entitlement as well as for disaster recovery, any of the single family new home construction, those pair together. So we want to go ahead and get that in place so we can start opening up the other programs. Our Historic Preservation Fund grants. We do the Paul Brune Revitalization Grant. All but 2 projects are out of their environmental review phase, so you'll start seeing construction activity. 114 and 122 East Dunklin has already started and is replaced or rehabbed, not replaced, rehabilitated their storefront. So we should be receiving a reimbursement request from them. But you'll start to see a lot of activity on Madison, where the Cole County Historical Society is, as well as the neighbor. And then 114A High Street, which is where the subway is located. They're going to be working on their storefront as well. We are working with the property owner at 206 to 210 East High Street, which is the old J.C. Penney building, to get that structurally sound. They will not be able to access the grant funds unless they get it out of the dangerous building status. But we will work with them. They do have until December 31st to kind of try to make plans for that adjustment. Otherwise, we'll deobligate the money and give it to the other projects. Design guidelines, I will take a kind of segue off. We have been, we being the stakeholders committee for historic preservation code revisions, have been working for the past 2 years to establish its own historic preservation chapter within the city code and kind of clean up the existing historic preservation code. We do have a draft that we are going to put out to the stakeholder groups, such as the Board of Realtors, Historic City of Jefferson, or any others that are interested, to review the draft code. That way we can update it. So I anticipate that journey beginning within the next couple of months.
Is that revisiting the capital overlay district too?
So that one's a little bit of a deeper dive. This one is just updating, making it more transparent about how you create a local historic district and what rules apply to you once you're there. The current draft also makes, instead of having the HPC review demolitions of anything over 50 years old, it's only for those that have been formally declared historic.
We've talked about that. So how do we start initiating that discussion? Because that is, I've been contacted by numerous developers. That's a real hurdle for them to do some major development, and there's vacant lots now there. So, Councilman.
Yeah, so the overlay is located in the zoning code, so that's planning and zoning commission process. So I would say refer process questions, how to get started to Director Smith.
We have been discussing that internally as well, and how to deal with that. I think a lot of it's waiting for the condemnation case to go through and figuring out what we're going to do with that 400 block. The draft design guidelines are 70% completed, and we are currently reviewing that along with our Historic Preservation Commission commissioners. And that will kind of address that as well, but also other areas within the city of work. Our West Main Phase 2 architectural survey, the SHPO has requested further research of our consultant, which is Stantec, and they are asking for additional funding. And I think the SHPO is willing to do that. So that project may take a little bit longer than originally anticipated due to the extra ask from the SHPO. I can't scroll anymore. I don't know. All right, there we go. State CDBG, this is the CARES Act that we applied through with the state, and we partner with the county. The construction on the facility across the street continues, and I've just got my first batch of reimbursements, so we'll work on processing that so that project is moving smoothly. State CDBG for Compass Health Planning, transformational housing. So we are currently going back and forth with DED in the environmental review. Once that goes through, we'll have a 15-day public comment period, and you'll start to see activity there. So the pattern is we're getting out of the environmental review process for all of these grants, and now you're going to start seeing the actual construction projects, which is the exciting part. Department of Economic Development, American Rescue Plan, or ARPA, Community Revitalization Program. We were planning to do demos at MSP, rehab some of the structures, and do some of the streetscaping to connect that neighborhood to the future MSP redevelopment. Local Tourism Asset Development Grant. We are working on a scope amendment to shift those funds from MSP to the new conference center site located at Madison Street. Our Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District grants, we received a $25,000 grant to repair the ripple bins and repaint them. We're also engaging with the school districts, both public and parochial, to enter into kind of an art contest to do some public education on recycling. It kind of double dips. We are able to use the education funds to educate the public, but we're also able to use the education funds to maintain our bins instead of using local sources. our pending applications that we have out there. We have the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. That is due April 24th, our formal application. And that's going to be entitlement funds for a little over $76,000, so we can create a plan. That planning document will then open us up to implementation funding through both the bipartisan infrastructure law funding mechanisms and also the Inflation Reduction Act. And then we talked about a little bit internally the bridge investment program. We've targeted this opportunity for the High Street Viaduct. So we'll be working internally to get that application ducks in a row. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the committee? Thank you. Appreciate your time this morning. All right, item B, MTP update. Mr. Gina?
I'm actually going to talk to you about a couple projects this morning because we have two major planning processes going on, and I just wanted to touch base on one we've been working on for the last year. So we have our active transportation plan that's winding down. We have a draft document, and then our metropolitan transportation planning process is building up at the same time. So they kind of overlap a little bit. December, we'll be doing public engagement on both of those planning documents, which can get a little confusing at times. So for the active transportation plan, we do have a draft that our consultants have provided for us. We've been working on this planning process for over a year now. This is going to be going to our Campo Technical Committee in December, and then that would probably be forwarded on to the Board of Directors after that at their December 20th meeting. Those are open meetings, so we would love to have any of you all who, Mr. Spicer, Mr. Schwartz, who haven't really participated in Campo at this point, you're more than welcome to attend any of those meetings and kind of see where we're at with our projects. The active transportation plan has approximately 170 projects in it that we've identified. 69 of those are bike ped projects, so those are things like greenway expansion and side paths. Priority sidewalk projects, signed routes. We have some long-range projects. Those are trails that are kind of more in the hinterlands that are pretty cost prohibitive to complete in the next 5 to 10 years. And then we also have, that kind of fell off the slide, we also have some intersection projects that are identified in there too that we'd like to see improved. Like I said before, this plan would be going to the Board of Directors in December probably, and then we would open a public comment period at that time. So if you do want to look at the draft before we open that public comment period, you're welcome to. It's out on the website currently. Anybody have any questions about the active transportation plan? Oh, go ahead.
No.
So moving into the metropolitan transportation. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Lester.
Maybe after, go ahead.
Okay. I will say the active transportation plan, those projects do filter into the metropolitan transportation plan. So our metropolitan transportation plan, we update this every 5 years. Just a reminder of what our Campo region looks like. We do take in Taos, Wardsville, St. Martin's, Holt Summit, fair amount of Cole County. So we work with all of those jurisdictions in all of our planning processes, and they have seats on our technical committee and board. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan has a 20-year planning horizon, so we're looking pretty far into the future. We look at transportation needs, set goals, policies, programs, identify projects for all transportation modes. So we're looking at roads and bridges, we're looking at pedestrian and non-motorized, that's where our active transportation plan comes in. Airport projects, rail projects, waterways, ports, and transit, all of those things are looked at. We already have several planning products around road and bridges, pedestrian, non-motorized, and transit. We do a lot of transit planning as well. So what we're looking for from you all is just to know that this planning process is going on. We'd like to have input. We have a public survey that's available right now, so we'd like to have as many folks as possible to take that survey. I would say my goal is to do better than the active transportation plan. We had about 800 people on that one, so I don't know if I'll meet that goal because it's not as exciting, but I hope we can. I hope you guys can help us with that by circulating that survey as well. It's out on social media right now. There was a press release that was sent out, so we're trying different avenues. It's up on our website. We'll also have some public meetings in December, one December 5th in this room, and then one at Holt Summit at their municipal building. I did see the news last night that misreported that that's on December 15th. It is December 12th, just to clarify. And this will probably be approved by May of next year. Anyone can provide us comments either through the survey or by going to our website or using our campo at jeffersoncity.mo.gov email address.
Do you have any questions?
Just, I know we've been having discussions in the mayor's transit task force about on-demand transit. And it seems like those discussions and that aspect would be getting into these plans as well. And I just will mention it. It seems to me it would need to happen. I don't see that it's happened, so.
I've attended a couple of those meetings just to provide input if requested. We do have several transit plans and studies that have been completed using some campo funds. So those are always available for use, and I'm happy to provide input if needed.
Yeah, once we get to that stage, I will be definitely using you as a resource. So thank you.
I also do have some handouts. We had some stakeholder meetings this week, so this is just some information on those illustrated projects that we have, just so you all can be in tune with that, and that is available on our website as well. All this information's on our website. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. I appreciate your time this morning. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved. All those in favor say aye. All right. Thank you for your time this morning. Brother.